I feel like no matter how much time I've spent reading on this, I don't really feel prepared because I don't feel like it's so many words, and it actually doesn't even feel like that much content.
No, yeah, I agree. I will say, though, so we're reading Das Kapital again, and
Yes, okay.
we're doing...
We're really enjoying it.
By Marx. I will say I enjoyed this more than the first chapter. The third chapter, he finally did start getting me in.
Yeah.
I was going to actually, because we're going to take a break from this. I think we decided next week. I'm down to have this be something that we...
Right. We got to get through all 3 volumes.
Well, yeah. I don't know about that, but at least do more of this, but we'll just come back to it. I don't know if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine. That lecture series I've been listening to about it as supplemental was he was saying that Marx actually wanted to write like 7 or 9 volumes or something. He didn't get enough funding or time or something to complete the project.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, wow. Yeah, I mean, he...
Wow.
Yeah, I think he did. He just sufficed or lived from patrons, I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah, and he fled to England and I think did most of his writing there, right? Yeah, it's an interesting... before Patreon, right?
Right.
He couldn't just set up a Patreon. Yeah, no, but I agree. I mean, we were texting about that. There's a lot of redundancy in it, but something about the way he was describing. I mean, it was. Don't get me wrong. It was still kind of annoying, but the way he was describing the interchange of like the metabolism of the market, I suppose, I kind of did like that.
Yeah.
For some reason, and I guess I'm starting to see where he's going with this stuff.
Right.
And I'm starting to understand why people latched on to his theories, I think, because, I mean, he does have an interesting way of describing everything, obviously. Right. Yeah. But it is super confusing and could definitely be less confusing.
It could be less confusing.
I mean, we were texting how he basically just explained inflation, and I was like, okay, well, you know. Although I guess he does have a slight nuanced perspective, and we can get into it. But yeah.
Well, I feel like everything is hinging on value being derived from social labor time. And so that's where
commodities, right?
And so
on commodities.
Right. But and I feel like he's sort of painted himself into a corner by doing that. But yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what he means by commodities still. I've watched tons of videos, I've read. I don't get it.
He had a good definition in I think the second chapter, which we did 2 and 3.
Yep.
But I got it. It's just something that is exchanged.
But it's not just anything that's exchanged. It needs labor value, right?
Sure.
Like it needs to have had labor input, like to use value, because he talks about how you can exchange to use values that are not commodities. Because he talks about primitive societies exchanging use values that are not commodities.
Yeah, okay, so maybe one way to start is to reiterate what value, use value, and exchange value is, because those are pretty fundamental to Marx.
Right.
So yeah, my use value, the usefulness of something, right, and a commodity.
What is it good for?
Yeah, what is it good for? Value is the socially necessary labor time required to produce a commodity. And then exchange value is the expression, I guess it's the quantitative expression of a commodity's value when it's being in relation to other
I feel like the
commodities.
The tell right there, there's a tell in that he's, I don't know, like overthinking it or something, that he's constructed a bad system, is that he calls a use value and an exchange value things. He's using the term value, and then he has value, which means something different. And so he knows that he needs to use the word value in use value and exchange value, meaning something separate from what he's calling value. So the entire labor theory of value, that value is hinging on social labor time, I think it shows that is not correct.
Yeah,
just in his own linguistic construction.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. And then this is obviously the issue of having a translation. Maybe.
No, I looked at it. He's using the same word. Yeah.
Okay. And I was also going to say, though, is that I don't know if he could have just been redefining things that people were already using. I mean, people obviously were using value as a defined thing, but use value and exchange value were discussed by people previous to him, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. And the term use value is using a more, I would say, a more reasonable version of the term value. And his definition of like the just value, the standalone value, is the one that I think he's redefining it in a way that he's messing himself up by doing it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I guess it didn't strike me as much of a problem, but I guess I'm trying to read him with an open mind at this point before I go in. Also, I don't think I'm generally as anti-Marxism as you are. I'm certainly not a Marxist, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, so what the I felt like chapter 2 was kind of redundant, and again, it could have been summed down very easily. So what? Sorry, I'm trying to find the notes again. Feel free to chime in whenever.
Yeah. I mean, he's talking about commodities. He's talking about how commodities are non-use values for their owners. So the owner of a commodity doesn't derive, doesn't have a use for that.
Oh yeah, it doesn't have a direct use value.
So like if I have a grocery store and I'm selling apples, I don't use the apples for nourishment. Other people want the apples for nourishment. So they're not use values to me, they're commodities to me.
Right. So he concludes, hence commodities must be realized as values before they can be realized as use values. So I guess that's to your point where he's putting kind of a greater emphasis on the social labor component.
Right. They have to be realized as the time it took to pick them off of a tree before they can be realized as things to sell in a store.
Right.
I mean, this is just a weird thing to say also.
Well, I mean, you've said previously how value is just kind of a strange and amorphous concept that nobody seems to agree upon. I mean, you know, obviously Austrian economics folk will have a different conception.
Right.
What I don't know if you know it, but if you do, it might be interesting to compare it.
I mean, the Austrian conception of value is essentially just how much any person wants something. It's not like a mystical or complicated thing.
So
it's entirely subjective. Everybody has a different valuation on like everything, and it changes over time based on what you want and what you need at different times. Which I actually think Marx agrees with when he's talking about use values. He even says that.
I was just about to say that sounds like just what he would call use value.
Yeah, exactly. But this is what I was saying last time, is I would call what he calls value price.
Yeah.
And then he has a whole other thing with price that we'll get to.
Yeah, we got a definition for that finally.
Right.
Yeah, I can't find the exact place where he defines commodity again, but I do. I
think he doesn't. I think he doesn't fully define it. And actually, that's what that lecture was talking about how he uses this term, and he on purpose never fully defines it.
Yeah, but he'll say things like, okay, what chiefly distinguishes a commodity from its owner is the fact that every other commodity counts for it only as the form of appearance of its own value, whatever that means, right? But a born leveler and cynic, it is always ready to exchange not only soul but body with each and every other commodity. So yes, he's very poetic, obviously. But it more repulsive than Yeah, okay, that's just he had a lot of analogies here,
Right,
that
right.
nobody understands because we're not in the 19th century. Be it more repulsive than Maritornes herself. Maritornes, a character from Cervantes' novel Don Quixote. Okay, I guess we, if we were more well-read, we should have been able to get that.
Right.
I tried reading Don Quixote, and he, I got turned off when he started talking about windmills for 30 pages.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Cervantes.
Yeah. Yeah, but my understanding here was commodities are things that are exchanged, basically. That's kind of how I thought about commodities.
But not.
Yeah.
But use values are also exchanged.
Yeah, but use values and commodities are separate things. Like commodities
Right.
can have use values.
What I'm saying is that commodities, as a definition, things that are exchanged. There are other things that are exchanged that aren't commodities.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's exclusive to commodities.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
just
they
saying
are. They're
that's-
exchanged.
That seems to be something intrinsic to them.
Right. Yes.
Which is when he was saying how, it's like a commodity's use value isn't realized until it's exchanged. It has a value, but or whatever I just said. Yeah, for the owner, his commodity possesses no direct use value.
Right. It does have a value, though, because commodities do have labor time in them.
Because of
They
the
have
labor.
value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so that's basically what chapter 2 was, right? No, I'm just joking. But yeah.
Because then he gets into money, right?
Yes. Well, he had an interesting point about nomads being the first to derive money. I don't know if you remember that, but he says nomadic peoples are the first to develop the money form because all their worldly possessions are in a movable and therefore directly alienable form, and because their mode of life, by continually bringing them into contact with foreign communities, encourages the exchange of products. So I guess that makes sense. But for some reason, when I was first thinking about it, it struck me as a little... Like, it almost feels like the first people that would develop money would be those living in cities, not
Right.
nomads. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he's right about that. I don't
haven't
even know
thought
how to
about it
look in. I
deeply.
don't even know how to fact check that either.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think he has any evidence for that.
I guess we'd have to look. We'd have to read, a variety of histories of money, which I'm sure there are.
Well, I mean, before that, he's the money form comes to be attached either to the most important articles of exchange from outside, which are in fact the primitive and spontaneous forms of manifestations of the exchange value of local products, or to the object of utility, which forms the chief element of indigenous alienable wealth, for example, cattle. So, I mean, he's obviously... Yeah, I mean... he doesn't have any historical examples other than just this. I feel like he's saying it. He's concluding that about nomadic people based off of previous claims that he's made. Obviously, I guess that's how we all do it. But it doesn't seem like the claim is necessarily based off of any historical fact that he's read.
Yeah, I mean, I have a note at the end of that paragraph about essentially like, is this true? I don't know. Because then he talks about how slaves can be used as a form of money. But it's not until bourgeois society that land is able to be used for that purpose. So he says, such an idea could only spring up in a bourgeois society already well developed. It dates from the last third of the 17th century, and the first attempt to put it in practice on a national scale was made a century afterward, during the French bourgeois revolution. And it was just, my note is just, is this true? I don't know. It seems a little wild, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, and as I think about it more, I guess I can see the nomadic point a little bit, because it's like, obviously he talks a lot about how the first money... Oh, yeah, money is a commodity, too, and we'll get to that, but I think those are some interesting points he's making. But the first money was, these precious metals, basically, that were, but I think the thing that stopped me from understanding this, or going the full way with what he's saying about nomadic people is that, money requires some type of agreement between people that you will accept this,
right?
And, I just feel like if you're nomadic and you're meeting a random new group of people and you try to give them like silver, they could easily be like, "What? I don't want silver." It's like, what good? I mean, I think this is kind of the whole thing with like, the Native Americans when the Europeans came, and it's just the Europeans were trying to give them, the Europeans were trying to get all this gold, and they're like, "You guys don't want all this gold?" I mean, and they were like, "No, we'll take your guns and all the textiles that you're making and stuff."
Right.
They had a different value system. So I guess maybe that would be a potential counter argument to that.
Yeah.
But he could just say, well, they just had a different money commodity than gold. But that's kind of my point, is that you need an agreement in order for that to happen. And I feel like the only way you would get an agreement is if you're in a community where you decide, okay, we're going to use this as the money commodity.
Right.
Okay. All right, I'll stop. We got to make this more exciting somehow. Somehow we got to make this exciking.
Well, this is what I'm trying to. This is what I'm trying to say. Like the stuff that I think he's getting wrong.
Yes.
Because I actually don't think it's exciting. So if I'm being honest, there's nothing exciting about this book.
No.
And he keeps saying really basic things.
Yes.
And I don't agree that money is a commodity either. I understand he has an argument for it, but I don't think his argument works.
Well, how can you not agree if you don't know what a commodity is?
Yeah, that's a great point. In terms of what I think a commodity is, I don't agree.
Can I ask ChatGPT what they think Marx thinks a commodity is?
Only if you call ChatGPT, not they.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll call him Zer.
Don't call him. It's not a person.
It is to me. You don't know my relationship.
Gross, dude.
You don't know the things I've done.
Yeah. Okay, no, it's a fair question that if I don't understand what he's saying about commodity, how can I disagree with him? I think that's a fair point. It's based on how I understand commodity and how I understand a little bit what he means by it.
Well, here's what ChatGPT says.
Nice.
According to Marx, a commodity is a product of human labor that is created not for direct use by the producer, but for exchange in the market.
Yes.
The commodity has two key aspects, use value and exchange value, but its existence is central to the functioning of a capitalist economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Didn't we already look that up? Didn't it send us that last week or something? That sounds really familiar.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It would have been 2 weeks ago. And God only knows I can't remember that far back.
Yeah. Anyway. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's kind of what I was getting at. Is exchange seems to be an important component of commodity, and then obviously the use value is an important component of commodity because that's how you're.
But it doesn't have a use value to its owner. I feel like it's these little things he keeps adding onto it.
Yeah, but that makes sense in my head.
But then money does have use value to its owner.
But it gets back to the point that it's not going to have use value for the owner, which is why they're willing to exchange it. Because if it had use value for the owner, they wouldn't exchange it. They would keep it and use it for themselves.
Right, but money's use value is its exchangeability for other things.
I see what you're saying. Yes. Is that what he says?
I have money. Yeah, yes. He does say that.
Okay.
Yeah. But he says that. He's not like missing everything. I just think that the idea that money is a commodity, even given that definition you just gave there, money is sort of invented or employed for the purpose of exchange.
That's a good point. We should just get ChatGPT on the podcast.
No. Okay.
I'm just joking. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good point. In terms of a contradiction, if you can find that spot, I think that would be worth trying to do because I think it's worth reading that. Because he could also be saying it's got use value, just not for the person again. Because it's the same idea as like you're willing to, if you need your money, then you would keep it. for like a rainy day or something like that. You're going to keep a component of your money, and maybe he'd say that component that you're keeping isn't a commodity.
I think he would say it is a commodity.
Well, until you exchange it. Do you see what I'm saying? But like if you're hoarding it, as it gets into at the end of chapter 3, maybe, I don't know though. Now I'm just
because he said, okay, so we have seen that the money form is but the reflex thrown upon one single commodity of the value relation between all the rest. Crystal clear, right? That money is a commodity is therefore a new discovery only for those who, when they analyze it, start from its fully developed shape. The act of exchange gives to the commodity converted into money not its value, but its specific value form. I have a question about this too, is I don't really understand what value form is. But continuing, by confounding these two distinct things, some writers have been led to hold that the value of gold and silver is imaginary. He then has a footnote where he talks about Locke and stuff like that. But going on, he says, the value that money can, in certain functions, be replaced by mere symbols of itself, gave rise to that other mistaken notion that it is itself a mere symbol. Nevertheless, under this error lurked a presentiment that the money form of an object is not an inseparable part of that object, but it is simply the form under which certain social relations manifest themselves. In this sense, every commodity is a symbol, since, insofar as it is value, it is the only material envelope of the human labor spent upon it.
So you don't understand that. I guess you're just stupid, Antushka.
Yeah, I mean, he says things before then. All commodities are merely particular equivalents of money, the latter being their universal equivalent. But he says that money is a commodity. The use value of the money commodity becomes twofold. I don't know.
Well, wait, continue that. The use value of the money becomes twofold.
In addition to its special use value as a commodity, gold, for instance, serving to stop teeth, to form the raw material of articles of luxury. So gold has a use value in terms of doing things.
Yes.
He goes on, it acquires a formal use value originating in its specific special function.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that's how he's getting away. There's some nuance in there. The fact that, because, again, and this is where he gets in later in chapter 3 about how fiat basically is not commodity, right? It's a representation of a commodity, but it's not actually a commodity.
Right.
So maybe this is the nuance where it's like money has a special use value that allows, it has two components. It's got the value or the use value as gold, which is, as a commodity. And then once it becomes money, it's got the money use value, which is
exchangeability.
Yes.
I would say that money is a symbol. I agree with him on that. It is a symbol for labor, more or less.
What do you mean?
I mean that the money that you have is a version of somebody signing off saying they provided this much value to me. Like the exchange of money is an agreement of exchange of values, and like I think Marx would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But money is not created as an object of exchange through labor input in the same way that like a pie is.
Yeah, I guess the use value here, and this is probably the paradoxical notion that's giving us a trouble, is the use value is, I think you even said this, is in its ability to be exchanged. Yes. Which is paradoxical if you're talking about use value, right, as something that's useful to you for whatever like as something that you wouldn't exchange.
Right.
Because you would keep it for yourself and use it. But it's a paradoxical component that makes money a special type of commodity.
Right. But he says that commodities do not have a use value for their owner.
Yes, but this is why it's a...
Except money or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's that money has, as gold, let's say we're talking about gold, it has the use value component of, being something that you want to give away because other people will find it useful. But it's also got this exchange use value that is a special type of use value. I guess that's basically what it is.
I think this is where what he's doing is annoying to me because
I can understand.
It's not that you can't sort of like suss out what he means. And commodities don't have exchange or don't have use value to their owner except money because money is a special commodity.
Yes,
fine. But why are you creating your system like that? You could say that money is something else, but he doesn't want to do that because he has this whole project that he's building the capitalist society, and money has to be a commodity because he wants to get rid of it.
Yeah, because everything's about commodities.
But that's what so he's finding pseudo clever ways of building his conclusion into his work.
Right. He had a goal before instead of truth. Right.
Well, this thing is like, if you think about it this way, then this. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely am sympathetic to that. And that's a major issue I have with this too.
If you call a pie a cake, then it's a cake. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's true.
And it gets back to sort of a thing that we've talked about with all, I guess you could say, the Marxist writers or whatever, overly academicized writing of just, this is the problem when you have people that get paid just to sit around and think and write. Is they get a little bit too abstracted away from reality, if you ask me. And I think that's kind of what's happening with Marx. He was sitting and having sex with a bunch of people. That's the other thing we don't talk about.
That's
but
fun.
He was a philanderer.
Yeah, nice.
It's fine. But when's the Me Too movement going to come from Marx? That's the question.
It's not.
It's not. But he's sitting in a stuffy apartment in London, writing about these things. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think he just got a little bit too abstracted. But I kind of see at the same time as I say that, I kind of see where he's getting at. It was not how I would think about it, but I sort of understand what he's coming at, and I actually liked what he was getting at the end of chapter 3 when he starts talking about how money is not a commodity, like I already said.
Right.
It's a representation. I'm sorry. Fiat is not a commodity. It's a representation of the money commodity, and as soon as you disconnect those two, you're going to have problems. And I think I wrote on my Instagram story, it's like, it seems that... Yeah,
you wouldn't like Nixon.
Yeah, because
of course.
Exactly, yeah.
Who does? Honestly, who does at this point?
Who does? What's his name? Roger Stone.
Roger Stone?
Was that his name? Who's that, that guy with Trump? He was all over the news in 2016.
Tucker Carlson kind of likes Nixon too, doesn't he?
Yeah, Nixon. Well, so does Louis C.K. It's funny. Louis C.K.'s talked about how he really liked Nixon as a kid.
That's funny.
Yeah. There are people out there, and I can understand it. I think the people that like Nixon are the people who think that the JFK assassination was a CIA coup. Because there's a quote that Nixon says, the same people that got JFK are the ones that got me, basically. Anyway, we don't have to go down that route, but we could. It's probably more interesting.
Yeah. So something else on chapter 2 before we move on, that it's a little bit funny to me how he's doing this, and this is, I think it's part of the root of the issue is the way he's talking. It's as if objects are possess like these spirits or ghosts of human qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because, we've talked in the past about how Marx was a materialist. But like that lecture series that I'm listening to, he's talking about how Marx is not a materialist in the way that people think he is. And the way that Marx conceives everything is in motion. Everything is dynamic. So there's no static definitions. Definitions are shifting and moving as the argument goes on. So, like, the reason it's hard to pin down what a commodity is because the definition of a commodity shifts. So, thinking of Marx in terms of anything being static is a mistake, according to this guy, who's been teaching this course on Marx. I should look up his name.
Yeah, we should quote him.
Because it's a pretty impressive course he's put together.
Do you remember where he's at?
No, I can look. I should have looked. I should have it ready.
If it's not a good university, I will discount anything that he says.
Nice. If it's not a good university.
Yeah, and
good is it you who? Yeah.
Yes, nice. I am the determiner. I am the determinant of good.
Good. Excellent.
Or the determiner and the determinant.
Okay. His name is David Harvey. If I go to davidharvey.org, this is good radio right here.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Googling things live.
I think we're about to skyrocket to whatever.
CUNY,
something.
The Graduate Center.
CUNY?
I mean, that's a very good university.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know about very good.
The Graduate Center? You don't think so?
What's the Graduate Center? I don't know it.
It's the graduate program at City University of New York.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, sorry. I hear people say SUNY.
SUNY is the state system, and then it just depends on which one.
I see,
CUNY is the City University of New York, and the Graduate Center is their graduate program.
That's the one in Brooklyn?
Yeah, no, yeah. It's in Manhattan.
No.
It's downtown. Well, it's near the...
I'm very glad that I'm ignorant about this because, I feel like a lot of people on the East Coast are ignorant of the Midwest schools. We're right back at you guys, okay?
Right back at you, yeah. Yeah.
And certainly nobody... Well, anyway, yeah. No, but you're right. Yes, that's a good school. Not Ivy League. It's fine. No, I'm just joking. But also, it is the belly of the beast.
Hey, I applied there several times. Okay. Yeah. Never got in.
Oh, sorry. But it is, and certainly I imagine there's a lot of Marxist professors that probably are very knowledgeable. You have to be knowledgeable about Marx to work there, I'm sure.
Right.
So, okay. So
he's a professor of anthropology and geography.
Well, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And he's teaching a class on Das Kapital.
Yeah, apparently he's been teaching it for 30 years, called Reading Marx's Capital. It's on, yep.
Well, so this is another problem, right? Is that it's like, yeah. This is when people talk about how Marxism has incepted the university system. It's like, why are we talking about Marxism from an anthropological standpoint? I suppose he was a human.
Right.
Yeah,
he was. I suppose. I was kind of getting the sense that he's not. He might be an AI, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
The other thing, this guy's history with capital is interesting because he said when he was a graduate student, he and a bunch of other graduate students sat down and tried to read it, and they sort of read through it and obviously didn't understand it very well. Mm-hmm. And he said you have to read it, 6 or 7 times to really get it. And in a way, now that we're reading it, I sort of buy that.
Oh, I completely buy that.
I definitely am not getting most of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And probably a lot of the stuff I'm saying about it is dumb because I'm missing key things.
Well, and I think also the thing that happens is you start to understand his style of writing and can read it a little bit more efficiently.
Right.
Because I think that's what was happening as I was finally as we're finally, I would say, making some progress in the book, is I'm understanding his way of making analogies,
Right.
And I actually like it. I'll be honest. To give him a few flowers, if I could. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We haven't even talked about how shitty of a day it's been for me. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Am I coming off that way?
No.
Maybe not. Okay, good.
No.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm the one coming off. Like,
No, I don't think so. It's been a horrible day, but anyway, it's fine.
it's fine. Well, it's probably not
fine.
fine. It probably sucks.
It sucks,
Yeah.
but
It's okay for things to suck.
It's true. You hear that, Marx?
Yeah, Marx.
You'd be okay with the shitty capitalist society for once, okay?
For once. Yeah.
Just man up and take it like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Do you have anything else on chapter 2? Because I think
I
it's
don't
probably
think so.
worth. Yeah, it's probably worth. Because I mean, chapter 3 was the longer chapter, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, and so what I liked about this is he's talking about money or the circulation of commodities. So he's getting into like the velocity of exchange, which is kind of exactly how it's. Well, I don't know. Do you want to zoom back? You were about to say something.
I wasn't about to say something. I'm just
okay.
thinking. The magnitude is another one. I have a question about what he's talking about.
Oh, the magnitude of value. Yeah, I guess we did. That's in chapter 2, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to get very formulaic in a kind of annoying way, but also an understandable way because math wasn't quite as formalized as it became, certainly in the 20th century. It was beginning to become formalized, but some of the way that he's describing it makes it, I think, even more confusing. But yeah, I mean, the velocity of exchange of money is essentially how fast it takes something to move through the system. And so he uses a sequence of like, you start with $2 and then you exchange it 4 times until it gets to the last person. And then you take the time that it took to go through those and you have the velocity. Right. And so all of this is building off of another formula of like the fundamental, I guess, the fundamental formula of exchange is it's money, commodity, money, right? Or commodity, money, commodity. It's interchangeable.
Right.
But I actually like that way of thinking about it, how, and it can be, I think, even more succinctly said as every sale has a purchase. So every time you're doing an exchange, every time you're selling something, there's also a purchase that's happening, obviously, which is why you can invert this commodity.
If somebody's selling, somebody's buying.
Yeah, which is why you can invert the whole idea of a commodity becomes money, which becomes a commodity again. You could also look at it as money becomes a commodity, which becomes money again. And so he's starting to talk about this metamorphosis, which is what I like. I don't know. I like this analogy of thinking about how at the end of the day, it's the commodities that are the determinant,
right,
and the most important thing for him.
Yeah.
And so he ultimately builds into this talk about how inflation occurs. He doesn't call it inflation, but that's essentially what he's talking about. How if most people think just if you increase the money supply, that's what's causing inflation. But he's saying it's actually, more fundamentally, it's that if you increase the money supply but don't increase the commodity, it's really the commodities that's determining that. Is that how you understood that? So if you increase the money supply, but you also increase the commodities, you wouldn't necessarily have price increase.
Right. Yeah.
But if you increase the money supply without increasing the amount of goods, then you will have a price increase. Which I think is a good point. I don't know. I see it that way, but maybe...
No, it is a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a good point, and I think it is a point that I wish that more people understood today. This is
Right.
the most important thing he said so far.
Right, which is, and there were people that were kind of saying this during COVID. It wasn't just the fact that we printed so much more money, but we also shut the economy down and we weren't making things
Right, more
anymore.
money chasing fewer goods.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is why, a McDonald's McDouble is like $6 now or something ridiculous.
Right.
I don't know. That could be slander, but it's something.
Yeah, no, I agree. There is no dollar menu anymore.
Yeah.
Because the dollar's not worth enough.
No. Nope. But Bitcoin is.
Exactly.
Dude, Bitcoin.
Think how many McDoubles you can get with a Bitcoin.
My goodness. Yeah.
My goodness.
We really, we weren't. I like to think that our podcast helped with the this Bitcoin surge. People heard our podcast and were like, "Oh, we got to go buy Bitcoin."
Right.
Not that it was, of course, not financial advice or anything like that. But,
Right.
It is kind of interesting how we put those podcasts out, and then shortly after, the price skyrocketed.
Nice.
Yeah. Somebody's going to take us to court for that.
Yeah. I hope so.
You hope so? Yeah. I don't. Nor should they.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Honestly, that was the big interesting point I had from chapter 3. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting point. I think I just have a lot of notes here about, like, this is why money's not a commodity.
Yeah.
You've defined yourself into a corner, my good sir.
You say my good sir?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
I didn't write that, but...
Okay, good. Oh, yeah. Oh, he had some interesting points. What, you increase the velocity of exchange, and then you decrease the number of the amount of money in circulation.
Right.
Which I think makes sense, but it was...
Yeah. The velocity doesn't really make sense to me. I don't really get it.
The quantity of money functioning as the circulating medium, or the average number of times a single coin turns over. That's the
in
average
some
velocity
given period of time
of circulation of money. Yeah,
or
just
totally, or ever.
Just like distance is, or velocity is distance over time.
Right.
So it's always going to be over time if you're talking about a velocity.
Right.
And so in this case, it's not distance; it's exchange.
Like
number of times.
Number of exchanges over some period of time, or over all time, maybe.
Yeah, but just like it just depends. Do you want to express it in seconds or minutes or whatever?
Right.
But yeah, and yeah.
There's an interesting point he makes towards the end of section A, where he talks about objects that are themselves no commodities, such as conscience, honor, etc., are capable of being offered for sale by their holders and thus acquiring through their price the form of commodities. So what he's getting into a conversation about how once price is developed, price can actually deviate from value.
Oh, and we should define. He has a definition of price. Do we want to talk about?
Sure.
I agree. I think that's interesting. I'm just
price is the money name of the labor realized in a commodity.
Yeah. Well, he also has exponent of magnitude of value.
Sure. But what is magnitude of value? What does that mean?
Yeah. And why is he saying the exponent? I was kind of annoyed by that because it's like, is he saying that it's you have the magnitude of value and then you have it, if it was squared, the price would be 2 or whatever. It's like,
I don't know. Word say he's trying to sound smart.
Yeah. Yeah, I had magnitude of value. Okay, price is magnitude of value. Yeah, I have that as... Oh, wait, yeah, I have price is magnitude of... Oh, price versus magnitude of value. Okay, so with the transformation of the magnitude of value into the price, This necessary relation appears as the exchange ratio between a single commodity and the money commodity which exists outside of it. So what the hell does that mean? So if the conditions of production or the productivity of labor remain constant, the same amount of social labor time must be expended on the reproduction of a quarter of wheat, both before and after the change in price. This situation is not dependent either on the will of the wheat producer or on that of the owners of the other commodities. The magnitude of the value of a commodity therefore expresses a necessary relation to social labor time, which is inherent in the process by which its value is created.
But this is where the dynamic definition thing is coming in.
Yes,
because
I agree.
He starts by saying that price is the money name for the labor realized in a commodity. So then the price and the value would equal each other in that case. But then he talks about a situation like what you're talking about where the price actually becomes different than the labor input. And so the price starts to deviate from the value.
Well, that's because earlier, and sorry, we're doing this a little out of order, but earlier he says money is equal to measure of value plus standard of price.
Right. But then this, right. And he defines money before he defines price. So
Yes.
How can money's definition be dependent on price?
Right. And then he goes forward and says price, 5 pages later, he says price is the money name of the labor objectified in a commodity. Hence, the expression of the equivalence of a commodity with the quantity of money whose name is that commodity's price is a tautology, Antushka.
Right.
Did you know that?
I mean, that makes sense. It does. An equation is a tautology, too. Yes.
Sure. But although price, being the exponent of the magnitude of a commodity's value, is the exponent of its exchange ratio with money.
Of course.
This doesn't make any sense.
That's another one I have. What an exchange ratio. Now, what does this mean? It's a new term. What are we talking about?
Dude, this guy was too much opium, Marx. Too much opium. That's what I think was going on.
Yeah.
In those seedy streets of London.
Yep. Who reads this and is like, what a genius? This is like,
people.
When I read this, I see an overly ambitious graduate student, and I'm going to say, like, you need to really refine your ideas.
Slow down, slow down and say, because it's like if you can't explain what you're trying to say clearly, then it feels like you just don't understand it.
Right, it feels like Marx doesn't have a clear conception of his own idea. And he's just bringing in these new ideas. Slow down. Like he's like, and this, and this, and this, and this. And it's like, whoa, I don't know what this is. Stop.
But that's interesting, though. So why have people latched onto him so much, though? Because, I mean, this is because you asked who reads this and thinks Marx is a genius. A lot of people.
I know.
Actually, I was just looking at Reddit. I think it was the r/Marxism subreddit, to be fair. But I mean, literally, I mean, people were like, this is why Marx is a genius. Because somebody was asking about use value and exchange value. And of course, people were telling him, well, like, have you ever actually read Marx and all that stuff? And people saying, you know, like, millions have read him and realized he's a genius. Why don't you? Essentially, is kind of what a lot of people end up saying.
Millions of people think the Bible's real. I don't know.
Ooh, you're getting into hot water now, Antushka. Why don't you just throw, you know, the Quran and
it's the same statement is true.
Oh boy, oh man, throwing the gauntlet down now. We're gonna have 7 billion people after our necks.
They're all after me.
Actually, not 7, it's like 5 billion.
It's fine.
Remember,
come on,
you got a lot of Hindus.
Don't exaggerate.
We'll have the Hindus and Confucianists.
But the Hindu texts are correct.
I would agree with that.
And they're genius.
Confucius knew what was going on too. So what I'm getting at, though, is that it's interesting. I feel like, and this kind of gets at our conversation last week with the Reckless Muse, sometimes the things that have the most impact are the most ambiguous because people can view them with a bunch of different perspectives, and so they can put their own stamp on it and be like, actually, this is what I think Marx wanted. Lenin's like, actually, guys, this is what Marx wanted.
Yeah, that turned out well.
Yeah, and then Marcuse's like, actually, okay, hang on, let's rebrand. We'll be neo-Marxists.
Yeah,
and yeah, and then it just goes on until it congeals into something.
Right.
Which is probably different from what Marx had originally even thought, or whatever he thought,
Right. I think that there's an attraction to the idea that we could live in a commodityless society, a profitless society, and things like that. It's not attractive to me because I think that something like the profit motive is one of the most important drivers of society, and it's really good. However,
capitalist shill.
Yeah, exactly. But there's an attractiveness to the idea that we can all just get along, man, and everybody will just sort of provide what needs to be provided in society with no incentive structure, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't really even understand why that's attractive, but it seems to be attractive.
I think it's attractive for the same reason that, like we were saying, like the Bible is attractive because it's like,
yeah, salvation is attractive, heaven is attractive.
Well, I think if you were to look at life from the state of nature, like Hobbes or whatever, or I guess the nasty, brutish, and short, and so having a philosophy that preaches universal forgiveness and benevolence and stuff like that, or in the case of Marx, who honestly I do think, I wouldn't be surprised if in 500 years people are treating Marx like a Jesus character because he'll just get mythologized so much. We're not actually that far away from Marx in the grand scheme of things,
right?
If you think about the Gospels and Jesus, it's like we're like 50, well, I guess we're like 100 years later, right? We're about 200 years past Marx, almost right. 200 years. So that's, in the grand scheme of things, we're not even at the Council of Nicaea, you know what I mean?
It's true. The difference, I would say, is there isn't a whole lot of mythology around Marx the person.
No, but there are, I don't know about that. I mean,
I don't hear anybody talking about like Marx's actions or deeds or anything like that.
Yeah, but a lot of people like to have that one picture of him, up with the beard, looking at you from. He's like slightly. Yeah. He's not. He's like his body's turned away from the camera, and then he's looking like towards you or whatever. Anyway, right. I don't know. But he inspired a revolutionary movement. I mean, right. Lenin had a bust of him. It's like maybe he's not mythologized for us, but I think a lot of people mythologize him. And I think it'll only become more mythologized maybe as we go. Yeah. And that's my point, though, is because he's pushing, at the end of the day, he is pushing a narrative of kind of like what Jesus was doing, of like benevolence and like, hey, let's all work together instead of trying to compete against each other. Whereas, right. The capitalists are pushing this like, guys, let's be honest with everybody. We're all kind of dicks and we're all competing, and that's kind of how it is. And so we need to incentivize this because it will in a roundabout way, it will lead to prosperity.
Right. I mean, I don't think it's that we're all dicks. I think it's that in order to, we want to gain things, we want to gain use value from our actions. We want use value.
But it's the idea, it's the selfishness is what I was being.
I get it.
Yeah. It's like you could say we're being honest about the fact that people are selfish, and so you want to incentivize that, because by incentivizing that, you'll actually create bountiful, goods that then people will be able to. You'll have enough for yourself, so then you can start helping others. Basically, that's right. But it's a roundabout way to do it, and so that's why I think it's difficult to argue. It's historically difficult to argue that point, whereas it's much easier to argue the Marxist point, which is why I think you get so many people when they're young that want to go towards it, because it's like, okay, you see this world that's really
right.
mean.
People who don't have to support themselves or do anything for themselves.
Yes.
Are happy. Anybody who is using other people's resources to survive is happy to continue using those resources to become tyrants with those resources. Yes.
Spoken like a dad.
Yeah. When you have other people's money, of course.
Yes, exactly.
And then you tell them they shouldn't be selfish because you want it.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
It's this thing. It's like it's not like these people aren't selfish. And I mean, Marx isn't even talking about selfishness. He's also being honest because he's talking about use value is something that fulfills a need or a want. And when he talks about how labor that does not produce use value is not labor, right? Mm-hmm. Which I agree with. Of course, it's the same. It's the thing like digging a hole just to dig a hole isn't valuable to anybody.
That's art.
Right. Well, if you can make it art, then it can be valuable, maybe. But then it gets to this point that I was talking about before we got diverted, because he's talking about price being related to value, and then he talks about how price can deviate from value in a variety of ways. And one is that there are objects that are not commodities, according to Marx, but that can have a price. It can increase the price of something. He talks about conscience, honor, etc., things like that somebody will pay for, but are not commodities. They're objects, I guess.
Well, can you read that part? Do you have that part?
Yeah. So he said objects that in themselves are no commodities, such as conscience, honor, etc., are capable of being offered for sale by their holders, and of thus acquiring, through their price, the form of commodities. Hence, an object may have a price without having a value.
Yeah, well, that's interesting he says that, because, I mean, I feel like argue that, like, honor has a value because it took time to develop that, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think you could make that argument, but what you'd have to argue, at least from Marx's perspective, that in order for it to have value, it has to have labor input. And this is where I'm saying
but that's my point, is labor going into,
Maybe.
But anyway, sorry. I don't mean to.
But this is where I think he's painting himself into a corner, because he's defined labor, or he's defined value as the like social labor time. And then there are things that people pay for that don't take social labor time.
Right.
And so then he has to have like a weird roundabout argument to like commodify them, right?
Well, yeah, with the form. He calls them commodity form, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe he needs to go back to the drawing board. Maybe something's not working.
Yeah. I wonder if he got clearer as he continued to write. Like if he read one of his later works. I mean, this is already kind of a later work, but it's certainly not his last. I mean, he died in like the 1880s, right? So he lived at least 15 years or so later.
I mean, it would be funny if we read something else and it was like immaculate.
Yeah, it's just, well, it's like, I mean, certainly what would have helped, but maybe he did this again strategically because he knew that if he threw down the gauntlet and defined exactly what he meant, it would make it easier to tear down his arguments.
Right.
Is if he had just kind of like what Hoppe did, honestly, of just like, this is this term, this is commodity, this is what commodity is. Even having just like a definitions page at the beginning.
That would be great.
Yeah,
but he can't do that because the definition changes as he goes.
Right. Let's see, when did Marx die?
More on-air Googling.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I did it earlier.
We need a what's his face?
We
need a what's his face?
Yeah.
64. So yeah, 1883.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I actually probably should run soon because I gotta get back to the stuff. But
okay.
I don't know if there were any other major points you wanted to highlight.
No, not really. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm down to have this be something we sort of slowly go back to and maybe read another thing of, because certainly it's an important piece of work, right? I mean,
right.
Lots of people read it and reference it and stuff, so it is good to have at least tried to read it.
Yep.
But it's tough. Yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ.
I think it's interesting, like as a piece of art or literature or something. It's interesting because the act of looking at the world through a specific lens and seeing what comes out the other end is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if you reduce the world to a world of commodities, what does that look like? That's an interesting exercise, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, but maybe we should read like a biography of him, because it is this question of, I posed it 2 weeks ago when we were reading it. It's like, why Marx? What was it about them that sort of, because a lot of people were putting out these sorts of theories, why Marx and Engels, and more essentially why Marx?
Right.
What was it that got everybody to glob on to these ideas?
Right.
Because what I find often is that it's not necessarily the best ideas that are the ones that make it out. And this is something we were talking about a little bit again last week, where I was like, I posed the question of, is it a little disheartening that there's so many people creating, because, it's this idea that there's a lot of noise. Right. And the Reckless Muse sort of said, basically they think it's good and that the cream will rise to the top. And I think that's certainly the optimistic way of putting it. But I think it's also like, I think more often the things that rise to the top have shadow influences that we don't fully understand, often in the form of just money, right, being pushed behind it. So, it wouldn't surprise me if he had a wealthy benefactor that was helping to circulate a lot of the stuff.
Sure, that's probably true.
And maybe just on the sheer fact that they had more people circulating it than other ideas, this is the stuff that sort of stood the test of time. But I don't know. Just, yeah.
Also, if there's any Marxists listening, it would be interesting to have somebody who considers themselves well-versed in this stuff.
Yes.
Talk it out with us.
Yes. Will you?
Because I believe that I'm missing things.
You are.
But
not me, though.
Yeah. Right. No, just me. I think I'm missing things. But a lot of the questions I have, I would be interested in somebody who considers themselves well-versed in Marxism, like address.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. We did it.
We did it. Cool.
All right. Exciting. All right. Goodbye, folks.
See ya.